Let's focus on what to do when consequences don't work. And they don't always work. Here's an example. When I taught the at-risk high school kids in that alternative school, some of these kids had very little impulse control. On a Friday afternoon, they'd be leaving school off campus. They see a car with the window open. They go, "Oh, car stereo," and they grab it and they steal it while the cop is looking, watching, riding up. It's just not very smart. So they get arrested. And they go to juvenile hall for the weekend. Right? So they're in prison for 48 hours. They come back to school on Monday. They act out. I threaten them with detention. It just doesn't add up, does it? So consequences clearly don't always work. So let's look at a way to change that so we can focus on what to do when consequences don't work. So this strategy, this roadmap, these strategies I'm going to share with you now will not work for all your kids because they're too labor intensive. But they can work for the 1, 2, or 3 kids who drive everybody the most nuts, and it makes a big, big difference. And of course the question arises, how much energy do you put with the 5% of kids? Well, you have to balance it. The focus is the well-being of the whole class and each individual, and it's a balancing act. As I said earlier, we can always put more energy in, so you have to find a way. Don't let all the kids fall through the cracks because they're not acting out, but do focus on those kids who are acting out where it makes a huge, better difference for everybody. Do the best we can with that balancing act. So the first strategy to actually permanently change behavior is called breaking the cycle. This is done in collaboration with Rick Kerwin, who wrote the book Discipline with Dignity. I'm going to give you 3 examples quickly, elementary, middle, and high school, but each one can be used at each level. So if you're a high school teacher, good to focus on the first one because you'll get some stuff out of it. Johnny's in elementary school. He's doing an art project every day. He's always the last one to put his supplies away. And it's driving you and everybody else nuts. So you pull him aside, have a private conversation. This is the hardest part, the time to have the private conversation. Once you have that time, it goes much easier, okay? And you say, "Johnny, do you want to be the last one putting your stuff away?" Johnny goes, "No." Number 1 is complete because Johnny wants to change. If he says, "I don't care," doesn't matter. You just assume the best about him, and it still works. This is the magic. I know you say you don't care, but let's work together as if you do, and we'll see what happens. It's very hard for a kid to fully fight something that serves him. And so with a little bit of inner authority and charisma, we just take the kid with us. And so put him, say it's you and Johnny in the classroom, just you and nobody else in the room. You put all the art supplies on his desk. Say, "Johnny, describe to me where these things have to go." "Well, the glue goes here, the scissors goes there." "Great. You got it? Let's practice." So now he gets up and he's moving around the room. You're helping him. You can hand him things. And he's putting things away. Do it a few times. He's practicing what he needs to learn, which is great for math. It's great for behavior. And then you can ask him, when he starts to get it down, "Johnny, you're doing so well, just you and me in the classroom. What happens when we're in class to distract you?" "Well, Maria kind of distracts me and George gets in the way." So he's becoming conscious now of his choices. And you give him some strategies for how to deal with those distractions, and then you give him some encouragement. "Johnny, you've done so well in practicing. I know tomorrow when we go live, you'll be able to do it." Okay? So the next day arrives, kids are doing the art project. You whisper over Johnny, walk over to Johnny, whisper in his ear, "Johnny, remember yesterday after school we practiced this? I'm about to announce that we put things away. Are you ready? Great, here we go. Okay, class, put things away." Use your sound signal, whatever it is, put things away. And then here's the key. You do the minimum that you need to do to ensure that he completely succeeds. You do the minimum to ensure his success. Now the minimum might be a whole lot. It might be putting your arm around him and walking from place to place and handing him items. But it's the minimum. And then the next day, same thing. Third day, start pulling back. Appreciating each time. Now pulling back, this is one of these keys of intellectual creativity for being a teacher. What are those steps? The basic formula, and this is for behavior or content or procedure, smaller steps equals faster learning. Smaller steps equals faster learning. It's counterintuitive. If you want to climb the stairs and each step is 3 feet high, good luck going fast. But if they're 7 or 8 inches, you can scramble up quite fast. So you might think with Johnny, "Okay, Johnny, tomorrow I'll stand in the back and watch how well you do." But that might be too big a step. So instead, I'll stand in the back. Every time you put something away, make eye contact with me, give me a thumbs up. I'll give you a thumbs up, and it's time for you to go on to the next station. That's one way to do it. Or give him a partner who works with him. But break it into simple steps. And eventually, as you pull back, it's now in what they call his muscle memory. It's solid in his memory, and you can move on to a whole different issue because he's got it. He's got it. So that's elementary. Let's look at middle school. Johnny is a 7th grader. He loves to blurt. He blurts things out all the time. You know what I'm talking about? Blurt, blurt, blurt. He's not even aware he's doing it. You give him a consequence, he goes, why? What? I blurted out, sorry. He keeps doing it. And so, pull him aside, private conversation. Won't follow the roadmap perfectly, but it gets pretty close. Johnny, if you tried, you first say, do you want to keep getting in trouble for blurting? He goes, no. Number one's complete. If he says, I don't care, I know you say I don't care, but let's work together as if you do and see what happens. Still works. And then you say, okay, so tomorrow if you tried really hard in my fourth period class to not blurt out at all, how many times did you blurt out anyway? And Johnny goes, I'll never blurt out again. Which is ridiculous, right? So you guide him, and he says, oh, maybe 3 times. Now you know in your heart of hearts, if Johnny only blurts out 3 times tomorrow, your life is golden. Woo-hoo, right? So that's great, Johnny. Tomorrow when you come into class, I'm going to put 4 Post-it notes on your desk. Your job, every time you catch yourself blurting out, or I give you a private hand signal when you're blurting out, your job is to peel off one of those Post-it notes, crumple it up, and stick it in your pocket. Let's see if you can have at least 1 Post-it note remaining by the time the bell rings to end class. So now Johnny is kinesthetically monitoring his own choices. He's slowing down to what I call the choice point, the point where he's conscious of his choices as he's making them. If he's not conscious, consequences won't work. What if he uses up all 4 Post-it notes in 20 minutes? I would give him more Post-it notes. He's exercising a muscle. He's learning a strategy. Let him exercise. If someone misses 4 foul shots out of 10, you don't say sit on the bench until you figure out how to make foul shots. You have him practice. Have him practice the appropriate procedure until he's got it in his memory. Now this is the removing of a negative, but instead you could add a positive. Give him a pie chart with 8 slices. Each slice is 6 minutes for a 48-minute section of class. Johnny, every 6 minutes that go by that you don't blurt out, you can shade in one of those pie slices. Let's see how many slices you shade in by the time the bell rings to end class. So again, he's kinesthetically monitoring his progress. You want to give him an incentive toward number of shaded slices, that's fine. But the idea is that he's now taking more ownership and he can visually and kinesthetically connect his choices. That's the idea. So that's Johnny. Let's go to high school now. John, his name is John. He lost the Y. Why? I don't know why. He just lost the what. Okay. Whatever. He's a senior. He may not graduate because he's always late to first period. He's chronically late to first period. So pull him aside, private conversation. Conversation with John. John, don't you want to graduate? He goes, well, duh. Number one's complete, right? Because he wants to change. If he says, I don't care. I know you say I don't care. Let's work together as if you do and see what happens. Still has the same power. Now, a lot of high school teachers think that's enough. They go, don't you want to graduate? He goes, well, duh. Well, I'm glad we had this heart-to-heart talk. But if we assume the best about kids, that they want to succeed and they're not succeeding, then let's break things into smaller steps, make them more conscious. So keep the conversation going. John, how do you get up in the morning? Well, my alarm clock wakes me up. Well, what's the problem? Well, I hit the snooze bar 17 times. Right? Have you thought about putting the alarm clock on the other side of the room? Cool. How about a second alarm clock? Double cool. You go, do you have a phone in your room? He goes, well, yeah. You know, your friend Charlie's always on time. Why don't you have Charlie call you, make sure you're up in the morning? He goes, cool, I'll do that. Will he do it? Probably not. It's a little weird for a high school kid to ask his friend to wake him up in the morning, right? So keep the conversation going. Well, when were you going to talk to Charlie? Well, after school. After school with your buddies around, you can ask Charlie to wake you up. Isn't that going to feel a little weird? He goes, well, yeah. So how are you going to do it? And what are the words you're going to use to get Charlie to know that this matters to you in a way where you save face? Here's some things you can try. So you're feeding him the lines. It's, in essence, practice. Keep the conversation going till you've really fleshed it out. And then finally, Johnny, or John, I'm glad we had this talk. I know you can be on time. I'm looking forward to seeing if you're on time tomorrow. I'll check with you. I'll also check with Charlie to see if he called you. Good luck tomorrow. Let's see if you're here on time. Now, will John show up on time tomorrow? Don't know. But he's more likely to because of the steps we've taken to make it more conscious so he can see his choices as he's making them. That's the bottom line. So these are not easy to do, but step by step by step makes a difference. I had a student who was a chronic complainer. His name was Keith, and he was in my class. This is when I was teaching at-risk high school kids. I had him 4 times a day. It was nuts, right? I wanted to complain about him, right? And I pulled him aside one day as a senior. And he would, like PE class, he'd complain about the activity. He'd complain about the choice of teams. He'd complain even if his team won. He just complained all the time. One day I pulled him aside. I said, Keith, you are no longer allowed to complain in my classes. He goes, well, that's stupid. I go, there's the first one. And he said, how come? I said, because I care about you. He goes, huh? I said, because I care about you and I want you to succeed and you're losing friends and you're losing jobs and this has got to stop because I care about you too much. It was very hard for him to complain about that. And so we started talking about what is a complaint, so he could be conscious of it. And it was very soft. In the first week or so, he'd complain and say, and I just give him a little hand signal. He'd go, oh, right. And eventually, he didn't stop complaining completely, but he cut, it was a bad habit. He cut way back, especially when I could connect his complaining to his, or lack of complaining to his success. So it's not just blurting, it's everything in the classroom. We can find ways to make these kids conscious of it and close the deal. So this 5 steps is labor intensive, and it takes a while. There is a shorter version, which will not necessarily permanently change behavior, but it can lengthen the time between misbehaviors, which in my book is good enough in most situations, and I call it the conversation. Now this takes place after a student has done his or her time. They've gotten a consequence, they do it, they come back, you have a conversation. And ideally, the student tells you what he or she did that was inappropriate. If time is short or they're unwilling, you tell them. Second step, they tell you what appropriate behavior would look like and or sound like. And again, you tell them if time is short. Third step, establish or reestablish a positive connection with that student. And as mentioned earlier today, that's the number one most important piece of this. If all you have time for one thing, make that connection with a kid, because that's where it will lengthen the time between misbehaviors. All the kids, even if they say, I don't care, just assume that they're craving connection, some form of connection. Not force it on them, but make it more and more available and watch the magic happen. So this conversation can take 20 minutes or 15 seconds. Here's the 15-second version. Johnny, yesterday I sent you to the office for swearing. Now there's 100 different ways you could have expressed yourself without swearing. We don't have to go over each one. I know you know what they are. Listen, I'm really glad you're back. I'm looking forward to a much better day. Have a seat. Let's see how it goes. So I just covered all 3 in 12 seconds. It doesn't have to take... Now the longer we take, the more impact it's going to have, especially if he's volunteering his own ideas. But that's the idea. Some debriefing after consequences makes a big difference in that whole functionality.